It is Friday morning, so we are back once again for another weekly coaching session here with Octopi Poker. So thank you everybody for being here. Today's topic, we're going to go through the general theme that we're focusing on this week, or sorry, this month rather, in our challenges on Discord. And that's going to be focused on dynamic flop textures. Now, these flop textures are very difficult ones. They're ones that people generally kind of hate playing. And I think it's really important to have a decent handle on what the principles are that govern some of these situations, just so that we can understand how to navigate them. Now, I've got the trainer open here, but I'm actually going to start out with the analysis tab, and I'm going to start with looking at some aggregate reports, because that's always the best place to start when it comes to understanding the general dynamics of how certain post-flop situations are going to play out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to a hijack versus big blind situation. And this is going to just be our sort of example situation here that's going to represent a wide variety of different types of spots. And we're going to open up the aggregate report and focus our energy on specifically boards that have 3 to a straight and are not monotone. And in particular, let's also focus on the two-tone boards. So we're just going to focus exclusively on these boards that people really find to be frustrating in terms of just how they allow for so much change in equity and change in ranges and change in distribution as we move through a 3-street hand. So we're going to start by just fleshing out what some of the differences are between how various types of dynamic boards are going to interact with ranges and how they're going to actually play out. And the first thing to notice is that the high card is going to be extremely important. So let's say, for example, we look at dynamic boards with a high card of an ace here, and we're just going to look at the in position c-bet node as well. We're not going to look at the big blind node here. Immediately, you can see that the 3 to a straight boards with an ace here are very favorable if they are triple Broadway. Very favorable for the pre-flop raiser right there. And if they are ace high wheel, they're much less favorable, right? You can see immediately there's a lot less betting on those wheel textures, ace 5-4, ace 5 deuce, etc., etc. So immediately that's quite an important distinction that we can make there. So that's the first thing, that ace high wheel, very different from ace high Broadway. Then, if we filter for a high card of king, well, now we can see that these 3 high card boards, these dynamic board textures here, that basically allow for a king high straight, but also a lot of 2 pairs. These are very, very good boards for us as the pre-flop raiser as well. You can see king jack 10 is basically range bet for big size here. So these are very favorable for us, much more so than what we might think, just because we have so many 2 pairs on these boards, and we also have sets, we have straights, etc. If we look at queen high, still very good. Same sort of principle, right? These queen high boards are actually very good for the pre-flop raiser. Jack high, oops, that's not jack high, that is queen jack. We don't want that. We want jack high right there. This is where it starts to get a bit more complicated. You can see that stuff like jack 9-8, jack 10-8, jack 9-7, jack 8-7, there's some slight nuances here, there's some slight differences in terms of how these board textures are going to play out. They are going to function differently in different formations, obviously, but there is a general trend here towards these board textures being pretty good for the pre-flop raiser, but starting to shift a little bit, especially when the big blind can have some of the offsuit 2 pairs that the in-position player cannot. Are we unlisted? Looks like we are unlisted. That is not what I wanted. Well, I think we're going to continue from here. Never mind. Sorry about that, guys. So we're now going to move into 10 high boards. We're going to look at 10 high, and as you can see, oops, we forgot to add the connectivity. 10 high connected is where it starts to get a lot more tricky for the in-position player. It starts to get a lot more difficult to navigate. If we go to, I didn't mean to reset it again, there we go. If we go to 9 high and below, we really start to see big changes in how these board textures are going to interact for the pre-flop raiser. We start to see a lot more checking, a lot more cautiousness, and generally speaking, this is going to cause the pre-flop raiser to do a lot less c-betting. There's a lot of boards here where we just c-bet less than half the time. So, in general, biggest thing to remember here is that when it comes to a board texture that has, for example, 3 to a straight plus a flush draw, that type of texture is going to most likely be very different depending on the high card. The high card is going to be one of the primary factors there that's going to alter the way that these board textures will play out. And on top of that, if we start to think about dynamic boards in terms of not just the boards that have 3 to a straight, but the boards that maybe just have an open ender, well, now we start to see that there's a couple of nuances that come in here as well. If we filter by the flop here, we filter just by high card, basically these open-ender boards, the thing that we start to notice immediately is that when we just have an open-ender on the flop, there's a pretty good incentive, or pretty good level of incentive for the in-position player to actually be using this overbet size at some frequency here. They are using this very big size. So when we come to thinking about how we're constructing our ranges and what type of c-bet sizes we're choosing and various things like that, we always want to consider that the status of the board texture as far as open-ender compared to an actual flopped straight is very important and very significant. That's going to be a major contributor here to our sizing. It's not the same when the board is ace queen 9 compared to ace queen 10, for example, right? Not quite the identical situation. King high, similar sort of a thing, except now these king high boards with an open ender are pretty connected, so they're going to be pretty good for us. Queen high, similar sort of thing. These boards are very good. You know, queen 10x, queen jack x, queen 9x or queen 8x. You know, these types of boards a little bit worse, so there is some change there. But loosely speaking, we're still doing well there. We've got jack high here, and obviously a lot of these boards are jack 10x, jack 9x. These are very good. We have all these Broadway hands that are connecting with these textures in some capacity. And then if we look at 10 high, we've also got a pretty clear trend here towards these 10 high boards being very inclined to use a lot more big sizes now. Now, if I also focus on unpaired boards specifically, that's going to give us an even clearer perspective. You can see that 10-9x, 10-8x, a lot of big sizes on these boards, generally very good for putting a lot of money in on the flop, applying pressure to a lot of those bluff catching type of hands. 9 high, similar sort of a thing, except now there's a bit more checking, these 9 high boards. Hey, Wang Chung, welcome. How do we get that view for aggregate reports? If you go into the analysis tab, and then you just open up you just collapse the other ones. That's all you have to do. Like if you want to just focus on one type of board texture, you can just collapse. Like if I focus on, if I want to focus on two-tone, I can just collapse rainbow and monotone. I can just look at it like this, right? It's pretty straightforward. So thankfully it's pretty easy to do. So welcome. Glad we got at least one person here. I mistakenly put the stream as unlisted, so we're not going to get any random non-Discord members coming in, but hopefully this is good for the Discord members as well. So you can collapse the view here quite easily, quite capably. And then if we just quickly look at, let's say, 7 high open ender, something like this, you can see now, these are, let's go unpaired as well. 7 high open ender unpaired, a lot of checking, but also a lot of very big bets. So again, we're starting to see some somewhat consistent trends there. So we're going to keep an eye on the general aspects of these board textures that are going to be relevant as we go into doing some trainer exercises. We will focus our energy there on just identifying how we're going to be constructing what sort of sizes we're going to use. So we're going to create a drill. We're going to go post flop, 60 big blinds, which is a good stack size to study. We're going to go hijack versus big blind, single raise pot. Board configuration is going to be two-tone. It's going to be 3 to a straight, or 3 to a straight or open-ender. I think that's going to be fine. And then we're going to go any high card, I think, and then no pair. We want unpaired exclusively. So that's going to basically be the guide here. Turn, yeah, I don't think we have to choose the turn here. We're just going to go with that. We're not going to go with necessarily any kind of, oh, wait a minute. Did I click two-tone? I thought I clicked two-tone. Dang it. Let's, it's gonna create the drill, but then we're gonna have to go back. Yeah, it's gonna, okay, never mind. Create drill. All right, let's do this again. Board configuration, two-tone specifically. Yeah, so we could include rainbow too, but I think two-tone is probably better to start with, just because it's more obviously dynamic, and I think people are a bit more concerned with how to kind of navigate those boards that have very obvious draws out there. I think the other thing to be very mindful of when we're looking at these board textures really is just that the presence of draws in itself doesn't actually alter strategies very much. It's the presence of strong hands. So if the opponent that we're up against has certain combos of two pairs or straights in their range that we don't have, or if there are a wider variety of stronger hands that they can have on a certain texture, that's going to influence strategies quite a bit. The presence of draws is not going to influence them that much. The two-tone version of a board versus the monotone version, not going to see massive, versus the rainbow version, we're not going to see massive changes in strategies there. What we are going to see is that if you switch from the two-tone version of a board to the monotone version of a board, that's going to be where we start to get some bigger changes. So our first spot, we've got 6-4 deuce, 2 diamonds, and in this particular case, we are in position, of course, with this hijack spot, and we have ace-9 off. Now, on this board texture, I would expect here 3 low cards. Villain does have the straight. Villain does not have all of the 2 pairs, which is kind of nice. But I think if we're going to bet here, the sizing that we're going to pick is probably going to be the 75%. And I think this particular hand probably has very limited incentive to bet because we just don't have a lot of good properties for doing it. So yeah, we're going to check ace-9. I think that's going to be high frequency there. It is interesting that this board is not actually a B75 board. That's kind of surprising to me, or at least there's only a small amount of B75. B25 is actually pretty good here, which is, yeah, like I say, a little surprising. So kind of curious to see that. But we do get a second check from the big blind. At this stage, I don't think we have any incentive to start betting. Our hand just basically beats all of the showdown value and loses to everything else. Yeah, we're just going to check it down. So that was a fairly simple check down spot. Looks like we got that one pretty correct. So we're going to go and move on. Now, this is somewhat connected in the sense that we obviously have 2 straight draws out there. We have the Broadway straight draw. We have the lower end straight draw as well. This one also is going to be a board texture where, because we can have top set, we can also have middle set. They can have some middle set, but not all of it. They can't have any top set. I think that it's going to be a pretty favorable texture for us. Villain has a lot of hands that just have to check fold here. So there are quite a few hands that are going to just be in rough spots and have to fold. The hand that we actually have, Queen 10 off, is going to probably be a pretty good betting hand, but I do think that when we have no diamond, I think we're going to probably bet less often. We're going to just probably be at the lower end of the mix here. I would say when we do bet this board, we probably use B75 a lot, but I'm going to check this hand right now and we'll see how it goes. Yeah, okay. Oh, okay, it's low frequency check actually. Wow, we're really betting this board almost range. Yeah, okay. Not aggressive enough. We did find a pretty passive play there, so that's kind of a curious one. Villain bets half pot. Don't think we can fold. Let's see. Yeah, we do call, and then he bets 9 bigs. We have a 10. We just fold here, I think. Yeah, okay. That's pretty straightforward, that one. So, yeah, we probably did miss a flop bet there. This one, I think we almost certainly are going to bet the flop with, considering we have that ace of diamonds. So we're just going to hit the bet button right there. Yeah, that ace of diamonds is going to be a really high frequency betting card there. Interestingly, ace-8 off plays almost the exact same frequencies as our overall range here. This particular combo is going to, more or less do the same thing that our range does in terms of frequencies. It's not that common that that comes up, so interesting to see that. But that was reasonable. Ace-Jack with a Jack of clubs. This one, I think, being 2 low cards here, it's not as dynamic as the other one or the other ones that we've been seeing. I think this is going to be a small bet board, probably at a high frequency. Ooh, we get check raised. Very interesting. Yeah, high frequency small bet, but actually some bigger bets too. Interesting. I think we probably have to call here with a club in our hand. Oh no, okay, it's just going to be a fold. It's a 0.1% mistake, so it's a very marginal mistake there. Not really a big deal. Cool, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the drill, and I'm going to alter it so that we are training specifically the 3 to a straight board. So we're going to go 2 pair, we're going to go no 2-tone, and we're going to get rid of these open-ender boards, because a lot of these open-ender boards are going to be ones that play very differently to the highly dynamic ones. Oops, it's taking its time to register that I clicked that button. Come on. Unhighlight the open-ender. If I click it again, it's going to do it again. Oh, maybe it didn't register it. Okay, let's click it. Okay, there we go. All right, cool. So, yeah, so we're going to look at a lot of these boards that are actually more connected here. Okay, this is the type of texture that I was hoping to be able to take a look at today. We've got 9, 8, 6, 2 clubs. Now, this is generally going to be the type of board that players are going to really have some trouble with. I think they're going to quite often veer in the direction of being far too equity driven with their betting ranges in these spots. I think they're going to be far too reliant on just always having some kind of a good high equity draw or something like that. And it's kind of interesting, I think, that in fact, when we do select our ranges on these board textures, it does quite often become favorable to actually be a bit more polar. If we're going to use let's say the B75 size, there are going to be some pretty weak hands that actually do bet here. Now, a hand like King 10 with a club, I think is going to be a pretty good hand to be betting here at a high frequency. So we're going to bet. Does say perfect. Ooh, okay, interesting. We get called. This just feels like it intuitively feels like such a perfect spot to bet, because we have a double gutter and a blocker to both flush draws. So I think it's probably going to be a bet, but it is worthwhile to note here that this is the kind of hand that really doesn't particularly like getting check raised in this spot. So I would say that it's maybe not as obvious a bet as people might think it would be. I'm going to hit the 11.5 button here because I think that's probably about the right size. Yeah, okay, it's actually super high frequency bet. So it's not, I mean, there is some checking here, but it's very good as a betting candidate. So we're not really, it's not such a big deal to worry about the check raise here. And we river the straight. Now, this is kind of interesting, rivering the straight in this spot, because we don't have the nuts, but we do have essentially the nuts. I imagine it's probably pretty unlikely that we have any size that isn't the all-in here. I think that half pot size, yeah, I think really what we're probably doing here is we're just shoving the river with a range of 10x and trying to put a 5 in an indifferent spot. So let's see where we're at. Yeah, we do shove, and shove is good. 100% shove. We do have a little bit of non-all-in in that spot with stuff like queens, top set of queens. and a couple other hands, but for the most part, the all-in size is going to be good. So our next one is King Jack 9. Now, this is an interesting texture in that I think people do tend to miss a lot of their c-bets on these boards. I kind of referenced it earlier a little bit. The nature of these textures is such that they have so many undercards in the big blind here, so much undercard stuff in their range that I think it isn't as functional for them to, or at least they just have a harder time defending overall against any kind of aggression. So it quite naturally is going to lead to us being able to bet probably our entire range. As far as sizing goes, I do think that the slight decrease in the strong stuff in their range, the lack of pocket kings, the decrease in pocket jacks, the lack of aces or ace king, I do think we are going to be able to bet big fairly often. And I think this hand is probably strong enough to go in that big bet range, and just kind of does still get action from worse. Yeah, so we got pretty good chunk of big bet there, and this hand kind of splits between both, so we're doing fine there. This is really interesting. We turn trips. We are in a really good spot, but at the same time, I'm trying to figure out what our size structure is going to look like here. Like, George has a lot of Jack X when he check calls the flop versus that size. And then he checks this turn. He's going to start to be a bit more concentrated into the area of King X, some 10-9, Queen 9 type hands as well. I don't think we're likely to be able to go for a super polar strategy here. Kind of feels like a half pot-ish kind of a spot to me. We're going to hit half pot and see. No, it's a 0% mistake. Okay, so it's like I'm technically wrong, but not really wrong. Let's try 11.5. Yeah, okay, so it does just go with the 11.5 size here. Wow, it's literally, that's rare. That's super rare. First of all, it's rare that our strategy is literally exactly 50-50 here. Range-wise, it's very, very clean. We bet 3/4 pot half the time, and we check the other half of the time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that this specific combo actually plays exactly the same way as our overall range, 50-50. So, we basically just can, just flip a coin and mix there. Now, George does call, and I think at this point, once it checks to us on river, we just have a pretty trivial jam. Yep, 100% jam with this hand, and George calls with King 10, and we win. Cool. Ooh, okay, the Queen Jack 10. This is a really nice board in this kind of a formation because George never has ace king here. So with us having all 16 combos of it and the board basically not blocking any of it, like there's no ace or king on the board, every ace king is in our range here. And that's going to mean that a hand like Jack 8, or really any hand in our range, we're going to be able to put a lot of money in, I think, with a big chunk of hands here. So I'm going to bet the 75 size, and yeah, we do fine with that. And you can see here we have some small bet, but also just a lot of big bet. If we look at Villain's response, Villain actually has to fold a queen fairly often here. And I think that it's maybe not super intuitive why that is, but essentially what it comes down to is as soon as we're able to put in a big bet on this board with a very, very strong range, a queen is basically just immediately turned into a bluff catcher. A queen is not going to be able to navigate 3 streets very easily here, and it just becomes very, tricky or almost impossible for a hand like, let's say, Queen 3 of diamonds. Ugh. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. For a hand like Queen 3 of diamonds to navigate and bluff catch across 3 streets. Also noteworthy that a lot of hands with an unpaired king are folding. Same with an unpaired 10. An unpaired 9. A lot of those hands are folding, obviously. And then 10x is also folding a lot. Jack X is folding almost pure in some cases. So there's just a lot of one pair hands that are actually folding here. about 2/3 of villain's range is folding on this board. So just a board where we get to shuffle in a lot of betting. Now, 7-5-3 with flush draw. This is an interesting one because this is one where we would expect to see at least some reasonable amount of donking from big blind. We don't see it in this particular case. We have a hand like pocket aces, which I think is going to kind of be pretty much a mix here. I would imagine we would be a little bit more confident to bet if we had a spade in our hand. I think I'm going to go check here. Yeah, okay, check is good. There is a little bit of betting, but with no spade, we're checking a lot. We face 3.1 on turn, so we face half pot. It's 4 to a straight out there, but we can't fold aces. And he checks river. Yeah, I don't imagine that we can really value bet one pair here, so we probably check. Yeah. Well, okay, so there's like a small amount. It's like very low frequency of value betting for half pot there with aces, but yeah, for the most part, we can just check it back. I think we're good there. Okay, 9-7-6. This one, again, probably kind of medium bet size, I think here. The 75 looks good. Hand like queens has a pretty decent desire for some protection against overcards here, so we're going to bet that hand. Does go perfect. The 4 is basically an irrelevant card here because other than 5-3, the majority of hands that were strong on the flop, you know, didn't change there. I think we're going to be able to put some good amount of money in here. We may even go for the overbet size here just to create that low river SPR and really put a lot of pressure on some of those one pair hands, pair plus gut shot type stuff. Let's try that overbet size. Yeah, we do like it. Okay, so it's low frequency, but it is in there. We actually prefer the overbet size with maybe some of the value hands that are blocking the straight, like pocket tens is high frequency overbet. We've also got overbet with like 9-7. Even Jack 9 is in there. I guess that's probably Jack 9 of diamonds. So there is a chunk of overbets there, but Queens slightly prefers the B75, so I think we're good with that one. Okay, 5-4-3, and we face a donk bet. So we do finally face a donk here. 25% donk. Can't ever fold an ace here, obviously. Not really a lot of reason to raise this ace candidate because I think it's just going to end up folding out a lot of worse hands. So we call. Turn is a queen. Queen of spades, specifically, which is obviously a very relevant and important queen. I think the primary priority here is to just think about it purely in terms of if we do bet, are we getting folds from better? Are we getting calls from worse? You know, those basic principles of how EV is driven and where it comes from. And in this case, it's pretty hard to see better folding, very hard to see worse calling. So I think we just check. He bets one big blind on river. I guess we probably call most ace high here. Too high up in our range. Yeah, we do call this hand 100% and we just lose to 10-3, so that's fine. Okay, king 10-9. This is really awkward. This is exactly the kind of hand that's like, it's just sort of sucks to have here because you do beat a lot of villains. You're way ahead of all of their undercards. Like you beat all their trash here, but we kind of have to range bet because of how good this board is for us. So we sort of have to turn eights into a bit of a bluff here, I think. We're going to go with the bigger size. Yeah, it is a range bet, basically 50-50 with this specific hand. We are getting a lot of better hands to fold here. You can see that we're getting some 10x to fold quite often. We're getting a lot of 9x to fold, so that's part of the reason for this larger bet being very effective with a hand like eights, and I think we did okay there. Ace, king, 10, pocket jacks. This is sort of a similar principle to the previous one. We have a hand that can actually, if we bet larger here, we are going to be able to get better to fold. We are going to be able to get an ace to fold sometimes. Well, probably rarely that an ace will fold, but occasionally an ace will fold. Certainly a king with a weak kicker will fold quite often. So I think we're going to go with the larger bet. Yeah, pocket jacks, high frequency big bet here. We like that bigger bet when we have that opportunity to really fold out. If you look here, fold out tons of king X. We don't fold out an ace here. Well, there's a tiny bit of ace 6 that's folding. Ace 6 is like the worst ace to have here, I guess. But yeah, it sort of seems like the general idea or the main idea here is to fold out a king with this hand, and that's going to be quite reasonable. Ooh, okay, we flopped the nut flush draw and 2 overs. Now, these spots are tricky, and the reason I say these spots are tricky is not because of any kind of uncertainty about how good our hand is. Our hand is very good, but it is important that we don't fall into that trap of just auto betting every time we flop a really good draw, right? And I think that is a pretty reasonable, it's a pretty common thing that people do. Like, they just basically, they flop the nut flush draw and it's like, oh, I have to bet, right? So the way I like to look at these situations is you want to think about your hand. If you didn't have the flush draw, what would your hand want to do? And if we just think about ace jack in a vacuum, ace jack of a different suit, that hand would not realistically be able to get called by very many worse hands. Probably not a lot of ace high or anything is going to call there that we're dominating. And we also probably wouldn't be able to get a pair to fold that often by betting, because a lot of the pairs here are just going to have some kind of additional equity as well. So I would think that if we didn't have this flush draw, ace jack would probably want to check. So the logic that I would apply here is that when we do have the flush draw, I think we actually can check as well. So let's see. Okay, yeah, it's high frequency check. It's playing pretty similarly to our range, and you can see here that 2/3 of the time, basically, it's checking with this hand. A little bit of betting, but it is a good spot to have a hand like the nut flush draw. Oops. Sorry, my phone alarm is going off. That's my bad. Terrible, terrible. Unprofessional behavior from me there. I think a spot like this where, you know, we do have the nut flush draw and we have a hand that's right in that territory where we can't get better to fold, really good opportunity to check on the flop and make sure that we do have some flush draws in that checking range. The turn here is a 6, which puts 4 to a straight out there, which kind of sucks. So certainly not going to be a spot where we get to show a ton of aggression, considering how much 9x and 4x the big blind has, how many 2 pairs and so on. I would probably expect that we don't really raise here with this hand. We may not do very much raising with anything, but if we do raise, I would expect it to be a little bit weaker of a hand than a hand like ace jack of diamonds. Let's see. Okay, we raise this hand sometimes, so there's a little bit of 50% raise in there. Interesting. Okay, so we're mostly raising with like a 9, and then a lot of 10x is raising because it just has a blocker. Yeah, it seems reasonable. We then river a jack and we face B30, so I don't think we can fold here. Can't fold top pair, and we lose to jack 6. Yeah, I mean, you can see we have a bunch of raises here, but raising with this hand would be bad. You can see it's losing about a big blind, so not doing well there. Okay, 6-5 deuce. Now we saw before that the 6-4 deuce was unexpectedly a bit more of a small bet board than it was a medium bet board. So I'm a little bit more inclined to think that this texture is probably going to follow that somewhat and be a bit more of a small bet board as well. But at the same time, just because it's a small bet board doesn't mean we get to bet that often. And if we're thinking about betting small and, you know, where some of that EV is coming from, it's not that easy to attribute obvious benefits to betting small here with a hand like jack 10 offsuit with no diamond. So I think I'm a little bit more inclined to check this hand. Let's see where we're at. Okay, so wow, okay, interesting. So this is actually surprisingly different from the 6-4 deuce. Wow, that's really interesting. So 6-4 deuce and 6-5 deuce, very, very different here. I would guess that it just has a little bit to do with some of the nuances that come with the 6-5 being connected together, because those 7-8, 7-9 type hands have draws now. The 6-5 off is going to be in range for the big blind more frequently than 4 off maybe. That might be contributing. Pocket 3s and 4s compared to 5s and 3s on the other board. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of nuances here for sure, but it's not immediately intuitive to me why these differences are occurring. We could go and investigate in more detail, really look into the nuances, really look into the specifics of how the ranges look on each of these board textures. But for now, I think it's enough just to recognize that we do have a strategy here where we're betting reasonably big. And interestingly, quite a few of the offsuit Broadway hands that are pretty weak here are actually more inclined to bet at a fairly high rate. Jack 10, Queen Jack, Queen 10, King Jack, King 10, King Queen. A lot of that stuff is actually doing a pretty good chunk of betting here. And I would think that that sort of speaks to the fact that we want to make sure that we have hands in our betting range here that are not necessarily just going to be super equity driven. They're not necessarily going to have tough decisions versus a raise. They're just going to fold and not really care too much about it. So we actually can bet there quite a bit on the flop, surprisingly often. But we do check. It checks to us on turn. Now, after villain checks twice, I think the range is obviously a lot weaker. I think that we're probably looking at a scenario where they do have a decent chunk of auto folds. So I would expect that small is probably going to function a bit better, maybe half pot-ish, but let's go small and we'll bet with this hand. Oh, 0.1% mistake. Okay, so if it's a 0.1% mistake, I would imagine what that means is that the correct answer is going to be either check or bet 50. Let's hit bet 50. Okay, yeah, it is a B50 spot, or at least for this hand. Oh, wow, okay, so it's like, it's just mixing all the sizes, mixing everything from 50 to 120, 125. That is interesting. Ace 9 off is the type of hand that's kind of favoring the big size there. There's some other hands that are favoring big size, but this hand can just bluff really any of those sizes, I suppose. So that makes sense. Okay, ace 3 deuce. We had not seen a wheel board like this yet, so I'm glad that we got one, or at least an ace high wheel board that we hadn't seen yet. The nature of these textures, we sort of previously saw that they're not going to be range bets like the ace high triple Broadway ones are going to be. They are probably going to end up featuring a good chunk more small betting than what we had previously seen from some of the other boards. And at the same time, they're also going to feature a good amount of checking. So what I would probably say here is that this particular hand, see, I want to say check again, but we bet Jack 10 before. I'm going to check again, but I'm not 100% on it. Okay, so it's mixing. Yeah, we're like 52-48 in favor of small bet with range, and then 75-25 with our specific hand. And now this is just a fold. So nice and trivial. We like trivial. Okay, 6-3 deuce. It's funny. We had the 6-4 deuce, then we had the 6-5 deuce, and they were very different from each other. Now we've got the 6-3 deuce. This one I think is also going to be a bit different, and the reason I think so is because all the 4-5 off is in big blind's range. Sorry guys, got to remember to breathe and get some oxygen when I'm doing these things. I talk too fast. So more inclined, I think, here to say medium size probably functions a bit better. Yeah. Oh, no. Okay. I'm going to go small. I'm going to go smaller size, and I'm going to go aces is going to be a bet, I think, if we're going to bet smaller. Okay. So mixing small and medium. Aces, no heart, kind of checking a lot, but mixing both sizes as well. So, you know, pretty straightforward, pretty rudimentary sort of an approach there. Or not rudimentary, but like pretty similar to the overall range. And that is going to work out fine for us. So I think we did okay checking. George checks on turn. The 7 seems like a sort of connected card, but it's actually just doesn't really change anything because 4-5 was already there. Kind of just a brick. I think if we did bet small on the flop, now we're going to have quite a bit of ability to bet the turn. We might even be able to overbet. Let's hit the overbet and see. Yeah, okay, so it's overbet or check. It's actually a very clean polar strategy here because that turn specifically is essentially just a pure brick. It's not really a turn that's going to change anything at all. And as a result, we do have the ability to take this fairly polar strat here. And with aces itself, we actually do a lot of checking with aces. We do most of our betting with kings here because aces just doesn't need protection. So, interesting one. Ooh, okay, another nut flush draw, except this time we flopped middle pair with the nut flush draw. So, let's talk through this one. This one, I think, because we had that middle pair as well, we're a lot closer to just having a super high equity value hand here. And it's a bit different to having nut flush draw no pair. So I think I'm a bit more inclined to just bet, use the big size probably. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so it is a big size board. We do bet, and this hand, you know, mixes a bit more betting than what our actual range is, which is pretty reasonable. And then we face this turn donk. Now, clearly we can't fold. As far as can we raise or not, well, we certainly can raise some hands. We certainly can have raises here, but I don't think this hand is going to be one of them. We're going to have to be much more polar. Wow. Okay, so we face a jam. Wow. This is probably not that bad of a bluff catcher because villain is unlikely to bluff that often with missed. Oh, wait a second. Hang on a minute. Let's look at the turn. We actually do raise the turn here. That's kind of surprising. We do raise the turn quite a bit. Yeah. Huh. That's a little surprising to me. We're doing a bit more sort of linear raising here than I would have thought. Ace 6 of hearts, king 6 of hearts are going to be in there. Looks like that's interesting. Probably wouldn't have found that in game. We do call and river. Yeah. We have a, like I say, pretty good bluff catcher. I think that, I mean, it's a pretty good bluff catcher because we're unblocking all of those potential straight draws, missed straight draws. We're unblocking a lot of the lower card missed flush draws, which might be the more likely flush draws to bluff with here. We are also blocking some full houses. We're blocking ace 8 offsuit, which is certainly a portion of the value range here. Still don't think we call though. Yeah, okay, so it's like low frequency call. It's like mixing calls. Yeah, I mean, it's just such a big bet. It's just such a huge shove on the river there for 2x pot, basically. It's, it's not easy to call there with hands that are more or less just going to be in that pure zero EV bluff catcher region. If we look at what our overall bluff catching strategy is here, over pairs and stuff are actually folding at a decent rate. We're not really bluff catching with anything like worse than, well, I guess we have some low pair in there occasionally, but for the most part, trips plus is just pure call, and then everything below that becomes just a bluff catcher. Okay, we'll do a few more boards. We'll do maybe like 3 more, and then we'll call it a day for today. Ace, king, jack. This one is, we've already seen that the triple Broadway ace high ones are very good for our range overall. I think we're going to hit the B75 here just because this is such a good board. And yeah, okay. It's basically B75 with almost range. Ace queen is like right in that same territory, so that seems good. We get the same flop as we did before, except it's a slightly different variation of it. We have the 5 is the offsuit card instead of the 6 being the offsuit card. And this time we don't have the nut flush draw, we just have the nut backdoor flush draw. This makes me a lot more inclined to potentially check here. We can get value from some worse 6x hands, but maybe we just bet and call a raise. Hard to really say. I think we check, but it might mix some bets. Yeah, okay, low frequency of betting. B75 or check is the strategy with range. Yeah, I mean, we can't fold now, even to B75 here. We have the flush draw and a pair. Ooh, yikes. These are the spots you hate, right? Like, we river 2 pair, we improve, but did we improve enough? We don't have a club in our hand. We obviously lose to any 7. I think it's natural to think like, oh, maybe this is a good bluff catcher here, but I'm not 100% sure that it is. I think we have enough straights and flushes in our range here that a hand like this maybe doesn't have to bluff catch. Let's hit fold. I'm kind of think it's a fold. Oh, 2% mistake. Okay, must be a call then. Okay, so it's actually 100% call. Okay, so let's see where we're at. It looks like we might actually just be calling. Yeah, wow, we're never folding 2 pair here. Interesting. I thought we would be folding 2 pair sometimes, and then, you know, sets plus would be like the stuff that never folds. It looks like 2 pair is not folding at all. That's interesting. We are folding an ace, just like a top pair hand though, quite often. So that's pretty much where the threshold is where we start folding. Worse than 2 pair is where we start folding. Very interesting spot. All right, let's make this our final hand. So we're coming up on, we've got 45 minutes or so. I have a meeting with the rest of the Octopi team to get to, so I'm gonna wrap it up shortly. 10 high, 10, 7, 6. Yeah, gonna do a decent chunk of betting here, but probably not 100%. I think that the 75 size is gonna work quite well when we have a heart in our hand. So I would say this is a pretty good hand to bet. Ooh, we get raised. We get clicked back. Yeah, we do bet, so it's like, you know, two-thirds of the time betting range, 50-50-ish with this particular hand. Ooh, we get raised here. Wow, I feel like if I had the ace of hearts, I wouldn't fold. With the queen of hearts, I'm really not sure. I think this is the kind of hand that's like right in the middle here, getting raised. I'm gonna hit fold, but I'm not confident about it. Okay. Yeah, it's okay, so it's mixing. It's like low frequency call, tiny frequency of re-raise actually. But yeah, basically just pretty much exactly the region of hands that Villain is making us indifferent with when they use that 30% check raise or the click back check raise on this board. So quite an interesting spot and a pretty tricky one for this specific hand. So I think that is a reasonable spot for us to wrap up this first session on dynamic flop textures. We're going to continue with this theme as we go through the rest of this month, and I hope you guys will join me next time. As always, Friday mornings, 10 a.m. here on YouTube. I think I messed up and put the stream as unlisted to begin with here, so we didn't get any public viewers coming in, but it is gonna most likely just be public as we go forward. So look out for that next time. But thanks, guys. I appreciate all of you. I will be back soon next week, and good luck in the meantime in the challenges, everybody. Thank you.